Okay, Assalamu alaikum. Assalamu alaikum, everyone. And I welcome you all to the Department for Educational Development 17th Educational Grand Round. Today's title for the presentation is Assessment Drives Learning and Beyond, the Experience of MRCGP into South Asia. The format of the session is half an hour presentation by our expert speakers, followed by half an hour session, panel discussion and question answer sessions. I would like to introduce our speakers. First presenter is Dr. Mari Andreades. She's currently working as a professor of family medicine at Jinnah Sindh Medical University and consultant at Aga Khan University Hospital. She is a vice chair MRCGP South Asia Board. She also has masters in health professions education. Our second presenter is Dr. Sania Sabzwari. She's working as an associate professor, Department of Family Medicine at Aga Khan University Hospital. She's a fellow of the American Academy of Family Physicians, and she has also obtained masters in health professions education degree. Our third presenter is Dr. Tabinda Ashfaq. She's currently working as an associate professor at Jinnah Sindh Medical University and consultant at Aga Khan University. And she's currently working as an exam convener from Pakistan and involved in exam organization and conduct. So over to you, Dr. Mari.
Thanks, Amber. So just to, both Asanya and I have done a master's from AKU, so we are very proud to be the alumni of the master's program from AKU. Thank you, AKU. All right, so thank you for calling me and our team together, the MRCGP team, for talking about how this exam evolved. And I think this is an exam which does not have an example anywhere else globally, because it brings together 5 countries of South Asia for a common exam with common assessments and with a common goal and vision. So I'm going to be sharing the screen for a moment. इसको तो बंद करेंगे ना? हाँ, ये टाइटल यहाँ से share. And हमारा ये okay. इसको जरा रास्ते से आ पाते हैं. All right. So I know. Just a second. Let me just Is that all right? Can everybody see our screen?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. So as Amber has very kindly given our introduction, I'm the convener, I'm the vice chair, I was the previous convener. Sanya has been involved from the beginning with the exam, and she has been the exam convener, especially for the applied knowledge test, and Tabitha is the current convener for the OSCE exam. So I just want to there's no financial interest arrangement or affiliation that would constitute a conflict of interest over here in this presentation. Right, so the overview of the presentation is I'm going to talk about the evolution and development of the MRCGP International South Asia. And we'll talk a little about how the utility index of this assessment works and what challenges we faced in that particular instant. Dr. Sanya will talk about the quality assurance processes, and I think for those of you all who are doing your masters or who are in the assessment process and are going to be developing assessment, this will have it will be a great learning opportunity as well as sharing of experiences for this particular objective. And then Dr. Tabinda is going to talk about what an impact this international collaboration has had, not just nationally, but also internationally and within South Asia. So if I go to the evolution and development of MRCGP, and that's the logo which was developed after we established our board as an independent body. So why the need for an international assessment? I think that comes out from the fact that the leaders of family medicine across South Asia have been pondering over the fact that we know that we have one of the worst health indicators in the world, despite harboring 1/4 of the world population, and our health system, especially in primary care, poorly developed. So in family medicine, the major leaders were thinking, what is it that we can do to improve primary care? And one of the reasons we have a poorly developed primary care is because family medicine is not established, and there's a lack of concept of professional growth in general practice. The general idea is that somebody who graduates after MBBS can go into general practice and there's no need of upgrading yourself. You just continue like this until you retire. So the need was for raising the standards of general practice and recognizing family medicine as a specialty across the region. Why international? Because of the fact that there were 5 countries collaborating, and we needed something that was external to bring that collaboration together and to have it recognized at a international as well as global level. So the first meeting for this particular endeavor took place in 2003, where 6 countries, that is Afghanistan, Pakistan, India, Sri Lanka, and Bangladesh, the leaders of family medicine organization met, and this was at the first Family Medicine International conference that took place at AKU. That's where actually AKUB has been instrumental in developing family medicine, especially in this particular endeavor. So the leaders got together and they talked about how a common accreditation is required to drive learning in family medicine across South Asia. And why did we decide to do a collaboration? Because it was clear that no single country has the expertise or the numbers to consider individual development and submission to an international accrediting body. And since RCGP already had an international exam, like in Brunei, Oman, Dubai, Kuwait, so they were very willing and wanted to help, we decided to approach them in this particular aspect. So it was going to be an exam with the same rigorous standards as MRCGP, but with a context which was local to South Asia. And initially RCGP supported us in many ways, but now we are completely independent and we apply to them for accreditation every 3 years. So the goal of MRCGP South Asia is to establish a shared family medicine clinical exam relevant to family physicians working in South Asia, to promote recognition of family medicine as a specialty, and to enhance the knowledge and skills of family physician and general practitioners. Now, what were the critical elements that actually brought this to fruition and actually made it concrete? One is, of course, the leadership. And we had, what should I say, visionary and very strong leaders in this aspect. One of them is Professor Riaz Qureshi, the ex-chair of family medicine. All the leaders of the family medicine organization across these 5 countries had a very shared vision, and they were well respected as well as figures within their countries. We got together, there were co-collaborators, so it was not just the leaders, but they each had a team who was willing to support this particular endeavor. And then, of course, international support was there from RCGP. And then, of course, the commitment of the leadership. So, you know, in the beginning, when the exams started happening, when we were developing the examiners, when we started developing the process, it required travel, it required a lot of time commitment as well as financial commitment. And I remember when we were traveling, many of our examiners as well as our leaders actually paid from their own pockets for their stay and for their trip in order to support this particular activity. Teamwork has been instrumental. We could have not reached where we are without teamwork. And not just family physician, but regional academic leadership have supported us tremendously. AKU, the Dean of AKU supported us in this. Similarly, within Sri Lanka, the college over there, CGPL, supported them in this endeavor. So we had support from many others beyond family physicians. So as I said, a number of regional workshops were held for the core team to develop a syllabus, to orient examiners on modern assessment methods, to decide on the format of the exam, develop a blueprint for both the written as well as clinical exam, as well as, I cannot see the last one, but I think it was about question, yeah, and to develop the question writing skills of the examiners. And believe me, many of us, when we started, we were blank slates. Many of the examiners and the leaders who were very committed did not have the assessment background or the educational background, and we all had to develop through multiple workshops, through learning, through education before we reach where we are. So if you look at the Miller's triangle, we've tried to focus on shows how and knows how. And so the shows how, the knows how was the theory exam, which was 200 single best answer questions, and the OSCE station, which was shows how, of 14 stations, with 4 domains in the marking grid, and Dr. Sanya will be talking about that. Now, workplace-based assessment was considered strongly, but at that time, when we started, it was not considered feasible, and so we did not go for it. This is an example of our OSCE blueprint, which you can see clearly has a primary system of area of disease, and then we have put in presentations in primary care. So somebody can present acutely. We have a chronic comorbid problems. Nowadays, especially the psychosocial element, which is a strong component of primary care and family medicine, and the importance of prevention and lifestyle changes to prevent disease. This is the OSCE blueprint. So the first theory exam was held in 2006 after a standard setting of the theory paper was done using Angoff. And the papers were held simultaneously across these 4 countries, Pakistan, Sri Lanka, Bangladesh, and India. We used the British Council as an independent body so that there would be no, no finger pointing. It could be transparent. And so they conducted the exams for us across the countries. 219 candidates at the exam, and the pass rate was 39% with an alpha of 0.9%, 0.9. Similarly, for the OSCE, 14 examiners from 4 countries. And then we had the International Development Advisor who was facilitating and helping us in this exam. And we had an external development advisor from RCGP as well as a psychometrician. All of them were there for the particular OSCE. All localized, standardized patients were used. So we did, initially the thought was get medical students, but it was decided not to use that because medical students are medicalized and they may not interpret or present the the case in a way which is actual family practice. 73 candidates sat the exam and the pass rate was 68%. With an alpha of 0.8, which was remarkable considering the variation and the variability and the factors that were involved in setting the OSCE. So now I'm going to talk last about the utility index for this particular exam. The reliability, as you saw from the alphas, is high, particularly for the AKT, and considering the amount of variables in the OSCE, it goes from 0.8 to 0.7, most of the time 0.8. The validity again is high. The construct validity is of applied knowledge. So we are checking both knowledge as well as the clinical problem solving skills. The content is set and reviewed by the family physician, and the scenarios are all based on common or important primary care presentation. Cost was extremely high, especially in the beginning. We had to take a huge loan from RCGP for the first 5 years of the exam, and then later this has been paid off to the full, and now we are totally independent financially. Feasibility was challenging very challenging. Getting people across countries to work together, to travel, to with their own ideas, and everybody has their own perspective of their workplace. The cultures were different, and now with COVID, it has become even more challenging. The acceptability again has been very high, huge demand for the exam, and the educational impact will be talked about by Dr. Tabinda as a third presenter, where it will be both at a micro level as well as at the country and regional level. Thank you. I'll now hand over to Sanya, who's going to take us through the quality assurance process.
Yes, Dr. Sanya.
Thank you so much. If we can move on to the next slide. So as Mari has already alluded that, the exam has wonderful reliability, both for the AKT and the OSCE. So there's a lot of work that goes behind such numbers that you just saw on the last slide. So please move on to the next slide. So what I'm going to cover is talk about basically three areas. So the first thing is elaborate just a little bit on what Mari mentioned. So exam type and the content of the exam. So how do we actually go about selecting our cases, selecting our questions, and what is behind the scenes work that ends up in resulting of a paper or an OSCE examination. The second most critical element here is human resource, or the people involved in this whole not just the examination, but the whole program itself. And then we'll talk about all the processes that again are involved at different levels with different individuals, which help us actually look at the QA of the program and eventually then the success of the program. So next slide, please. Okay. So again, what we did was we initially at the start, we had decided, as Mari had mentioned, that we thought we'd look at evidence-based measures of assessment and not use things like Viva and etc., which has really fallen out of favor in medical education in the last decade or more. So we decided to use a two-step examination, the first being the AKT, which stands for Applied Knowledge Test. And again, like there was 200 question paper, single best, which looked at really the nose of the candidate. This becomes a must pass. So all candidates have to go through these two stages. Stage one is the written exam. The candidate must pass the written exam in order to qualify for the OSCE, which is a 14-station OSCE, again, which is the second stage and the final stage of the examination, in which the candidate will demonstrate the shows. So we're looking at these two areas. What's important is that the content for the validity of the exam, the content for both these examinations is derived from problems that are seen across these 5 countries, and that they are common across 5 countries. So as an example, if dengue is not common in, let's say, Bangladesh, we would, not put in a lot of questions on dengue, and that's just an example. Next slide, please. So the process is fairly standard, I think, across a lot of examinations that we see, and especially here at AKU as well. So everybody who is making questions sends us questions on a standardized template. Now, the questions that are given to us by the examiners, all of these examiners undergo training for developing either a single best choice question or developing an OSCE. So all of these examiners will undergo training before they submit. So they give us some sample questions. Those sample questions are reviewed in workshops. We help them understand, what they've done right, what they need to work on and improve. And then they start actually submitting actual questions that we will then do an initial review of. So there may be a single reviewer from the core team. So there are 2 core teams here. One team is the AKT team that does look at all the questions and they do the workshops and they review, revise, accept, reject questions. And there's a core OSCE team, which again looks at all the OSCE stations that are developed and so on. So as the initial review is done, the initial review takes the question into the workshop, in which the group then does a review, and we either obviously choose to accept the question, send it back for revision when there are some minor issues, and then outrightly reject certain questions. All of these, however, whether we accept, revise, or reject, we send detailed feedback to each examiner, so he or she actually learns every time they submit their questions, so they realize why their question was rejected and why it was sent back for revision. And they get a summary that you sent 20 questions, we accepted 10, we sent you back, 5, and we rejected 5, and this was the reason. Next slide, please. Okay, so then we look at, so that was all about the content. Now we talk about the processes for the AKT. So the paper itself is a mix of old and new questions. It is set via a blueprint. So the blueprint that Dr. Mari showed, that's a similar blueprint that we use for our AKT. So it has from care of the elderly to surgery questions throughout. There are questions, then there's a miscellaneous category as well. And then within that, we decide whether we want diagnosis questions, management questions, and so on. Being a postgraduate exam, obviously, there has to be a balance between just diagnosis and, and management. It can't be heavy on one side. Once we do that, we actually use standard setting for their 2 papers a year. Usually, or COVID sort of changed that, but we were doing 2 papers a year. We use anchors. Anchors basically are questions that have performed really well from the old questions, which are anchored into the paper, and that anchoring helps us decide the standard setting for that exam, because obviously new questions we don't know, we haven't behaved yet in terms of exam stats. We do a pre-hoc through an Angoff method, which is done every 2 to 3 years, which I think most of you should be familiar with. Our post-hoc basically is done through exam stats, which is done by a psychometrician. All the poorly performing questions are reviewed again and for rejection or that. But before that, what is generated from the post-hoc is there's a point by serial for each question. That tells us, whether the question did well or not. It gives us also the proportion correct. So out of the 100 candidates, for example, how many were able to answer the question correctly? How many chose option A, B, C, D, E? There are 5 options. And then the ones obviously chose the correct one or not. So we look at whether there's a negative point by serial, that means there's a negative correlation, or we look at a positive correlation. And that helps us look at the question quality, and also sometimes reflects on how candidates are looking at that question. And we also have an overall reliability of the exam. Our exam bank is robust. We have more than 5,000, probably even more questions in there, and we keep adding approximately 200 questions a year. And then what we do is we can go back to an old exam. So let's say an exam paper from 2014 or 15, we pull those out, we review the questions from there, and we decide, oh, this guideline has become redundant or is old. We will either revise the question or delete it from the bank. So that's how we those are our processes for the AKT. Can you move to the next slide, please? Thank you. For processes of the OSCE are sort of similar. We have the blueprint, but again, every exam that we set, when there's an AKT followed by an OSCE, we ensure that we review the AKT blueprint, so we're not repeating the same questions in the OSCE as well. For example, if we have lots of questions on, let's say, herpes, in the AKT, then we're going to not try and add another case of herpes in that. We'll choose something else from infectious disease or neurology in our OSCE. So we make sure that the breadth of the blueprinting is covered across both exams. For the post-hoc of the OSCE, again, there's exam stats which are generated, which includes looking at every station performance. We also look at every examiner performance. Because the exam is held over anywhere between 3 to 5 days, we look at daily stats of the station and the examiner, and then all of those are actually sent back to the examiner. So if I'm an examiner, I will know how I'm performing, which again helps me, try and do better the next time if I haven't done well. The OSCE bank is also there. It's a robust bank because, again, it is reviewed on a regular basis and revised also on a regular basis. And I think about 4 to 5 years ago, when we realized that our candidates were struggling in examination skills, it was decided to actually conduct OSCE workshops for the candidates. The way we did the OSCE workshops is that the examiners who conduct the workshop are generally not allowed to be examiners for the following OSCE, to make sure that there is no bias in the examiner as far as, so if I teach a set of candidates, I should not be examining them because I may have an hidden or unconscious bias in terms of passing them. So that's what we try and do. Next slide, please. Okay, so human resource, the most critical part of this is that if you look on the left-hand side, you see that we're talking about examiners, and the right-hand side talks about the SPs, just standardized patients. So all examiners are selected based on specific criteria. So we look at their experience, where they work, whether they've been involved in academics or not. Then once they are conducted through a rigorous process, so we do actually their interviews, and there's a selection by the core members of the board. They will select those examiners. Once they're selected, those examiners undergo training workshops for both AKT and OSCE. And again, they're asked to give us sample questions in that. So, and we give them robust feedback on how they did with the OSCE development, how they did with the MCQ development. And then we also invite them to participate in our workshops, in the ones that are run by the core group members, so they gain more experience and their comfort level increases as to what the process is like. SPs are also selected based on specific criteria. We look at their language, their communication skills, and obviously their ability to do a little bit of acting based on the case. So SPs then are selected, and then they undergo training as well. And one of the most critical elements, I think, of our exam is that SPs train on the stations that they'll be assigned. So pre-OSCE, there's a 2 to 3 day workshop that is held in which the cases that have been selected for the OSCE are practiced with the SP, the particular SP. So he or she is completely clear about the case, what to present and how to present. And those are vetted by examiners. So for example, the one I train, the SP I train, may then be examined by Dr. Mari. So, there's a lot of cross-checking, which allows cross-checking of the station itself, the construct of the station, plus the fact that the SP is also double-checked and triple-checked to make sure that, everybody's doing okay and there are no mess-ups in terms of the script or the acting. Next slide, please. Next slide.
I'm trying.
Okay.
Let's go one page down. First, kyun gaya, Aisha? Now why is this giving trouble?
There we go. Okay. All right. So this basically is our crux of the whole thing. If you look at quality assurance so we do quality assurance of the content itself. We do quality assurance of our processes, and obviously all of us who are part of the exam. So I talked about this, at all poorly performing questions or OSCE stations that happen. If we start with the exam, so we take exam as our first point of quality assurance. So all those questions that do not do well are reviewed. For example, if there are 6 or 10 questions out of the 200 questions in AKT exam that did not do well, they are taken in the very next workshop of the AKT, and those questions are reviewed, revised, or outrightly rejected if there is a need. Can you go back, please? Thank you. Okay. And then they are revised before they're banked again. We will try and run one poorly performing question after revision one more time in the very next examination. If it continues to perform poorly, then we will decide to reject that question after a second try. We obviously do a lot of old paper reviews, so we are up to date in terms of our guidelines and management in such cases. For example, use of aspirin, pehle dete the, ab aspirin primary prevention ke liye nahi dete. If you have a question like that, we'll review it and revise it based on the latest guidelines. There is, during the OSCE examination, we have examiners who are seated and they are doing double marking. So if I'm an examiner, one of the other people may be sitting with me and also marking parallel without me knowing, and then those examiners the examiner who's doing the double marking will compare my scores with his or her, and that gives QA for me as an examiner to make sure that I am diligent in what I'm doing, and I'm able to ascertain the good from the fair to the poor candidate. And that feedback is given to the examiner as well. There is candidate feedback on SP performance as well. So we have debrief after the exam is over in terms of the OSCE, and the candidates will give us clear feedback on the station, on the SP performance, and obviously we take that back and then that's collated and shared with the key stakeholders. Candidates also give feedback on the AKT, and again, that's something that we take very seriously. When we get some emails about a particular question in that, we try and respond to that and address the issues as per need. SP peer feedback is also done. So and one SP will give feedback on another SP and share what they did right and what they did wrong. And then exam stats. So how the examiner performed is shared with the examiner, so he or she can improve where needed. Each station performance is reviewed by the core team for the OSCE, and again, that is looked at and the station is revised if needed. The lead member. So when I was leading the AKT group, when we're doing the transition between me to the new member, we team up for 6 months. So the processes and the content and everything is clearly understood by the incoming lead. So then there is the transition is made easier and no issue in terms of the quality of the exam happens. And then after all of this is done, we have an external review every 3 years of the entire program, as well as the exam itself for accreditation purposes. So this sort of gives you the idea as to the different steps of QA that we apply in this whole program, especially in the assessment bit. So thank you. Now I'm going to hand over to Dr. Tabinda.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Sanya. So up till now, you have seen as Dr. Mari has discussed about the evolution and inception of the exam, and Dr. Sanya about the quality measures, how we are working hard to maintain the standards of the exam. I'm just going to share the direct and indirect measures of impact which has been created through this international educational intervention. So I'll start with the direct impact. So at micro level, we see is the number of the family physicians who have been graduated, and which was our ultimate aim to upgrade and the knowledge and skills of the family physician. Then there are number of examiners who get trained through this tedious process through the OSCE and the AKT part. There are a huge number of examiners which have been trained. There are a number of standardized patients who got trained through this whole process to be a part of the OSCE exam. Then the whole process has also improved the clinical practice of the candidates and the examiners. As Dr. Sanya clearly mentioned, that this exam is a process where while even making the MCQs and during the OSCE station, the examiner also have to be updated with the recent guidelines regarding the management and, so the medical literature which is coming just to be updated so that the evidence-based medication is being assessed, the candidates is assessed on the basis of the evidence-based medicine. So even similarly, growth of the examiners and the standardized patient is also seen in terms of professionalism, leadership, and time management, as some of the core members get the chance to be lead during the AKT sessions or during the OSCE exam. So they develop themselves in terms of professionalism and they grow as an academic leaders. And they also get a chance to get an academic appointment. Similarly, they also get enhanced job opportunities. So Now I'm going to share, this is a data which shows the number of candidates which have been graduated all over the world. You can see the overall graph. This is the world map, which you can see the major, most part of our graduates are within the South Asian countries, but you can also see there are few candidates who appeared from Australia. There are few from South Africa. Then there are from Nigeria, Algeria, Jordan, and many other countries. So it's spreading all over the world. Similarly, this is the data, which is a graduate data from 2007 to 2020. And you can see the major part is from Pakistan, which is 636 candidates so far has cleared this exam. And followed by Sudan, which is 376, then India 214, and Sri Lanka 148. As Dr. Mari clearly mentioned, that initially there was a huge struggle regarding the acceptance of the specialty with the growing number of the candidates all over the world, especially with the South Asian countries. If you can see, we had a huge struggle in India. So you can see the number is growing and the acceptability of the specialty is increasing and the number is increasing. Similarly with Pakistan and similarly you can see with other countries. This is data regarding the number of the trained examiners and the number of trained standardized patients. So as I mentioned that during the process of this exam, making the OSCE station, conducting the exam and training the standardized patient, making case writing, each and everything, train the examiners. So far we have trained 50 examiners all over the South Asian country. The breakdown is 19 are from Pakistan, 12 from India, 16 are from Sri Lanka, and 3 from Bangladesh. Similar to the examiners, we also have the privilege to train standardized patients. So total number is 66. So there are 28 from Pakistan and 38 from Sri Lanka. And as this has been, as we all know that SP training or the standardized patients are a good resource which can be used for teaching and assessment of the healthcare professionals. So once these standardized patients have been trained very well through this tedious process, they get opportunities to work in other institutions nationally. Within their own local organization, they are hiring them or they are calling them for conducting their own OSCE exam. I'll discuss later on. So some of the quotes which are given by the examiners and the candidates which show their impact. This is a professional growth which is seen that examiners said that being a senior examiner for RCGP South Asia from the inception was in fact an additional prestige and respect from my colleagues, and also it helped me to move up the ladder as a leader of family medicine in the region. Similarly, there was another quote which said, I've been a co-opted member in the Board of Study of Family Medicine, Postgraduate Institute of Medicine, University of Colombo. This is the recognition I've received due to being a MRCGP international examiner. So they had academic prestige and they were academic leaders. This similarly enhanced clinical practice. So one of the examiner quoted that my clinical consultation skills have dramatically improved since I became MRCGP examiner. It has benefited my patient clientele and some of them appreciate me openly for the difference in my diagnostic and management skill, which have been inculcated in me through the training I've acquired by being a MRCGP exam. So another by the candidate says that before appearing in the MRCGP exam, I used to refer the majority of cases to subspecialty. But now after clearing exam, I've become more confident and can deal with the majority of clinical problems more confidently. So you can see the exam has overall improved the clinical practice of both the examiners and the candidates. Similarly, patient satisfaction, which is in our ultimate goal of our clinical service or to improve the health indicators. The examiner, one of the examiner quoted, my clinical consultation skills have dramatically improved since I became MRCGP examiner. It has benefited my patient clientele and some of them appreciate me openly for difference in my diagnostic and management skill, which have been inculcated in me through the training and have acquired by being an MRCGP examiner. One of the candidates said, my counseling skills and diagnostic skills have improved and my patients are more satisfied now. This is one of the achievement I think we have been able to achieve through conducting this exam, and at least that patients are more satisfied as compared to previously. So now the indirect impact, if you see, there were improvement in local examination assessment, case writing, examiner training, etc. I was mentioning previously that through the process, the way we take through the overall process of conduct of the OSCE exam, case writing, as SP training, and case piloting, everything, the whole process, that trains are all examiner in such a way that their experience they can incorporate, and they have been incorporating that experience in their local organization or their own institute, where the local examination structure or the assessment process has been improved. Similarly, the development of standardized patient bank for universities has improved, SP training skills have improved, and growth of family medicine organization professionally has been improved as compared to previously, since the acceptance and visibility is more now. The acceptance of specialties has increased. People are talking about family physician, family medicine is there, much more acceptable than previously. That has improved the growth. That has also given a chance to the local organization. So this is one of the quote, improvement in local examination assessment. Examiner said that I was able to help establish the system of OSCE formation, piloting, and SP training and its implementation at our institute. This was one of our great achievement to improve the health system. Indirect effect, at the macro level, there was recognition of speciality at national and international level. So we had some of the board members who became the BOMCA representative later on, as they were included in the MRCGP board. So they became the part of the BOMCA organization, and then there was mainstreaming of the speciality all over. And we can also, there were a lot of strengthening of local and regional linkages. For example, one of the examiner got representation at international and overseas network. One of our examiner got selected for Australian College of General Practice as an examiner. So we also had privilege to develop training programs at international level. We have got the chance to train general practitioner in Nepal, which ultimately helped to improve their general practice training. And there was a few of the publication or research which were published through this process. So this is this is the training workshop which we conducted in Nepal, which was done to improve the general practice practitioners who were working there, to improve their knowledge and skill part. These are few of the publication which have come through from some of the MRCGP examiners. So this is another one. And this one, and this one. So the impact. So future direction. So so far, like we have discussed about the overall evolution, conception, the quality standards, the impact. One of the gap which we have identified was the lack of training. There was no structured training available for this exam. So we have thought, and we have been thinking, and we are in the process of development of a hybrid curriculum. For that purpose, we are also thinking of inclusion of a workplace-based assessment method, which can be included in the curriculum for assessment purpose. Then we are also thinking for that purpose to develop training the trainers for the new curriculum. Similarly, there are opportunities available in, we have been asked to train family physician and do some training in Maldives, Indonesia, and Brunei, and we are looking forward for it. Thank you. Thank you for the presentation.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Davinder. And I would like to thank all the speakers, expert speakers, for the wonderful presentation. Now we move on to the panel discussion and question answer session. If you have any questions or queries, just please share your questions via Google form, which is already provided in the chat box. For the panel discussion, I would like to introduce one panelist, Dr. Naveed Yusuf. We have invited Dr. Naveed as as an expert. Dr. Naveed is the Associate Director, Assessment and Research at the Aga Khan University Examination Board and Assistant Professor, Department for Educational Development at the Faculty of Health Sciences, Aga Khan University. Dr. Yusuf obtained his PhD in Medical Education and Standard Setting at the University of Oceania. He is an honorary advisor on psychometrics from the Royal College of General Practitioners International Board and member of the International Association for Educational Assessment Recognition Committee. Thank you, Dr. Naveed, for taking your time out. So we have received questions from the participants, and we will start addressing those questions one by one. Okay. So let's take the first one. It seems that examiners give a lot of time to make the MRCGP International successful. I would like to ask, what is the secret to make the clinicians provide the time? As at AKU, we are always told the clinicians do not have time to be examiners in the OSCE. So any comment? Yes, over to you, Dr. Naveed, Dr. Tabinda, Dr. Mari, and Dr. Sania. G.
May I try and answer that?
G, sure.
So I think one of the things that happens is that we try and actually not do the exams in our workplace. So which actually helps you kind of get away from that. So for example, certain exams in Karachi are held in a venue, obviously a different venue. So it's not like AKU में वो venue है और वो exam हो रहा है. So I think that makes a difference because people can actually get away. So as an example, when we're doing the mega retreat, which has been a very successful venture that AKU has undertaken, it's done on a Saturday, it's done outside of AKU, right, in a hotel. People are served a really nice lunch and everything. So the attendance is high, people are less distracted because all of us have clinical responsibilities. So I think that's been one of the strategies which has helped us kind of, keep people's appetites full and keep them less distracted. I think that's one of the things that gets people to focus on the task that they're assigned to do. So I think that's one of the things. That's my opinion. Yeah.
So I just want to say it is a challenge, and I think the question has been very aptly put, especially for clinicians who have to do so much more than just be examiners. It is a challenge. I think one of the reasons that we've been able to succeed to date is the commitment of the examiners. People who know the need is great, and they have to give that much of themselves in order to develop the specialty is one of the main reasons that we are. But as we are growing and more examiners are coming into the fore, the challenge is increasing because of the variety of examiners and because of the spread of the exam.
Okay. So any other comment from the expert panelist and from Dr. Naveed? Any further comment? And then we will move on to the next question.
Thank you, Dr. Amber. As somebody who is external looks at the psychometrics, I would say, as has been explained in the presentation, getting recognition to be part of an international exam and opportunities to network and learn from experts from other countries is also one of the major reasons that faculty are very enthusiastic and motivated to participate as examiners. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Now we move on to the next one. The number of SPs are disproportionately more from Sri Lanka. Is there any particular reason for that?
There are more from Sri Lanka. I'm not sure whether there's any particular reason for it. The exams initially used to be held only in Sri Lanka in the first 3 years, and then it shifted to both Pakistan and Sri Lanka. That means once a year in Pakistan and the same year in Sri Lanka. So the Sri Lankan portion developed earlier, and I think that's one reason that the SPs are more in Sri Lanka.
Okay.
Can I add?
Yes,
There's also
yes.
the exam is conducted in English, and that's why we find that Sri Lankans generally tend to be more comfortable using English as a language. In Pakistan we find it hard because we have it's an international exam, so we can't use Urdu as our medium of examination for SPs. So that's why I think we've been able to get more people from there. So we have our little bank in Pakistan as well, but it's just harder to find it because of the language issue.
Okay.
Yeah. In addition, can I add? So whenever we are making a blueprint or whenever we are doing the SP training, just a month before that, we are assigning, when we are making blueprint, we are assigning the SPs. So if we think this is just the number we have shown, so we continuously keep on recruiting SPs as per need. As soon as we are getting it, we recruit the numbers, and there are few people who also leave so that may be a discrepancy. Let me also show a little bit of
Also, the challenge has been to get
a certain age group.
the age group.
So because we struggle with the younger age group, a lot of cases, if we are developing in the blueprint, we have to have younger age group and especially the older age group. So we struggle and keep on looking for the SPs if they are, fitting our eligibility criteria, we recruit them. So that is a continuous process. Yes.
So if for the audience, if you know of anyone who wants to be part of this exam and who's really good in English, especially in Pakistan, please do let us know.
Okay, so let's move on to the next one. How often do you change the OSCE TOS, and how do you address the challenges posed by this TOS change?
You want to answer that? You're the OSCE. So we initially started the TOS with 5 domains. I mean, with 5 areas. That means the presentation for acute, chronic, psychosocial, and preventive. But we also had an undifferentiated domain. And over time, we realized that really the undifferentiated was not helping us in putting the spread that we wanted. And so that was changed to just 4 domains, and of course, all the clinical systems that were there. So in the last, I think, 8 years, we have not changed the OSCE TOS.
Okay. So any other comment? No. Okay. So the next one is the workplace-based assessment is included as the component of summative assessment?
Not at the moment. We are moving towards that. That's the area that we think we really need to work on, and that's why we're developing the online hybrid curriculum, which will include formative online assessment, workplace-based assessment. So trainers are going to be identified in different countries, and the candidates who are going through the curriculum will have to do some hands-on training with the trainers of those countries, in their own countries.
So any other comment from other presenter or from the panelist? And then we will move on to the next one.
If I may
Yes,
add,
Dr.
Dr. Amber, I think this change has been made because the examination was just focused on one-time assessment and the final product. Things were missing which were looking at or observing or assessing the journey of the candidate.
Yeah.
To enhance the support, to be watchful of the journey, and to help the candidates move through different levels of expertise till they appear in the exam. This has been added in the curriculum. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, so the next one is, how did you do the SP peer feedback? Because in one of the slides, it was mentioned that SP peer feedback was there. So how did you conduct that?
Want to talk about?
Dr. Sanya?
Okay.
So what we do is that whenever there is during the exam station, we assign one of the senior or experienced SP to sit together with a junior or a new SP, and there is a standardized checklist available through which they the mark the station and we compare their points, and the senior SP then gives the opinion about how that particular SP or the junior or newcomer SP has been performing. It has domain like how was the body language, or what was the opening statement clearly coming out or not? Was he looking confident? What was he responsive appropriately at time when it was required? So there are particular domains which are covered, and then the senior SP gives comment to the junior SP. Similarly, in one of the examiner who is doing a double marking, they are also checking the SP performance. So when they are doing double marking with the other examiners to check their stats or check their assessment, the double marking examiner also assess the SP performance. And we assess and then we give feedback later on. And this is the verbal plus the written feedback which is given both by the senior SP and the SP examiner.
Okay. So any other comment from the speakers and from the panelists? So we have one more question. It's related to that double marking seems to be a dream as the faculty is busy in other clinical work and other administrative work. So what would you recommend regarding this double marking the process?
So yeah, senior. So double marking, I think we published a paper on it, and especially initially when we started the exam and we were double marked by senior colleagues who had a lot of experience, it was acceptable. We do need to have 2 or 3 in every OSCE exam. We have 2 or 3 people, senior people who are actually conveners sort of for that particular day. And so they are the ones who sit in with the others to double mark, because so they've also blocked off that time of the day for that. It's very difficult to, unless you have people already assigned who are going to be double marking, it is not going to happen. People can't just walk in and walk out. It's just not possible.
Okay, thank you. And with this, we will take final remarks or comments from the speaker and from the panelist. Any further comment you would like to add, and then we will conclude the session. Any other comment from the expert speakers, panelists?
So I just want to say, I hope that I think as examiners and as being part of the exam, we have learned so much just by going through the processes, and that has helped us tremendously. I hope this presentation has helped those who are listening in terms of how, working together and being able to understand the intricacies of assessment, particularly of an applied knowledge test as well as an OSCE. Teamwork is critical. We cannot do it on our own. You need a full team and at least of 3 or 4 people who could work together.
Yes, any concluding remarks from other speakers or from panelists, and then we will conclude the session.
If I may add, I think
Yes.
the success of the examination is because of the dedication of the committee, the board, and the examiners, and very keen interest in the thorough quality assurance. What you have heard is very religiously and rigorously being followed. All the examiners are actually in the training room around 7 a.m. in the morning. So they report an hour or 2 hours earlier than the start of the examination. Every morning there is a briefing session. There are refresher sessions for the examiners, and there is 100% attendance, regardless of being very experienced or very senior examiners. Similarly, every evening there are debriefing meetings. The data is being looked at every day. Feedback is being sought from SP, students, and faculty. So I think it is a 360-degree feedback assessment and focus on very rigorous quality assurance is the key to success for this examination. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Naveed. Any comment from Dr. Zubairi, Dr. Tariq?
I would like to say a few things, if possible.
Yes, Dr. Zubairi.
Okay, Assalamu alaikum, everybody.
Walaikum, lovely to see
First of
you.
all, I am so proud of the three of you. I cannot tell you how proud I am. I sit here with my heart overflowing. So thank you very much for this wonderful ETR. And number one, it's based on a lot of stuff on assessment. Number two, you've all taken it and flown with it. Leave alone what you learned, that was way behind. Number three, you're all from family medicine and you have taken it to great heights. So that at 3 levels. I was also very pleased to see the collaborative way you went about presenting it. And why it makes it educational is the systematic development, administration, reflection, quality insurance, and the continuous improvement cycle. So I just want to say, well done. And thank you very much. It was very nice listening to you. And actually, that was one of my questions when I said, we need to do the same at AKU. What's the secret? So well done, all of you. Well done, all of you. Thank you very much. And we need to do a lot more, I think, in motivating people like you have done. So
Thank you. Thank you, Dr.
Thank
Zubairi.
you.
Yes, Dr. Tariq, would you like to comment? Would you like to
No,
add?
thank you so much, everybody, Mari and Sanya and others for this excellent initiative. And then it's one of the renowned thing which is going on in the country and otherwise. I would also like to congratulate and maybe appraise Dr. Riaz Qureshi, who has initiated this activity, and Dr. Rukhsana Zubairi. I think she has been involved right from the beginning. कुछ ना कुछ involvement तो होगी definitely. Dr. Zubairi developing assessment and others. So I think it's an excellent effort, and I think Mari and others, I think really congratulations on this.
Okay,
Thank you.
Thank you.
So I would like to
I would also actually congratulate Dr. Naveed Yusuf, who is the psychometrician attached. And so all of these quality assurance endeavors is very great. And as you were talking, I was thinking of Val Voss, and we should somehow convey where you have reached and how well we appreciate her initiatives as well in this. Yes.
Thank you, Dr. Zubairi, Dr. Tariq, and I would like to thank our expert speakers and expert panelists for a wonderful presentation and for taking their time out and attended this session. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Allah Hafiz.
Allah Hafiz.
Khuda Hafiz.
Hafiz.
Well done. Khuda Hafiz.
Khuda Hafiz. Lovely to see you.